So you are confident that in September when the leaders meet, a bulk of the conversations will be around the issues that you just outlined?
I would say yes, that should be the progression. Every G20, there is a strong element of continuity. And there are some new ideas which come in. My sense is that you would see some ideas come in as well. Probably a bit early, may take a few meetings more for that to move. But I would certainly hope that by September, we would have a G20 leaders meeting which would look at the crucial issues pertaining to global growth and global development.
Sure. So one of the consequences, I guess, because of the war, perhaps it's been accentuated because of the war, is the world is increasingly looking like two blocks. You have the United States and its partners on the one side, and you have Russia and China on the other, most of all because of what happened last week when Xi Jinping went to Moscow. What do you make of that? And how, like, again, I come back to this, how does a country like India play that? Because we are in neither camp.
I think you are oversimplifying this, deliberately so, I understand.
The journalist occupational hazard.
Yes, absolutely, I get that. I'll tell you why you're oversimplifying it. It's not, Russia and China versus the West,
sure,
in that simplistic a term. After all, the primary partner, economic partner of China is the West, and the primary economic partner of the West is China. So they have an enormous amount of economic interface there. Where Russia is concerned, I would actually go back to my initial point, which is, I think one of the natural consequences of the Ukraine conflict is that Russia, a Eurasian power which has historically looked much more towards Europe, today finds its relationships with the West very, very difficult. So that Russia is inclined in many ways, therefore, to turn much more to the Asian side of Russia.
Yeah.
So I would predict fairly safely, and I think the numbers this year already bear me out, that you will see an intensification in Russia's relationship with Asia as a whole. Now, you spoke about Russia, China, but I would suggest to you that many other countries in Asia, maybe not economically all of the same size, but there are some fairly consequential economies. We would number one of them. And my expectation is you will see actually Russia also show that much more interest in developing its cooperation with India. Now, if you look at the India-Russia relationship, for the last 70 years, this has been one of the most steady relationships in international relations. That, take all the major players, Russia, China, Russia, West China, you've seen enormous volatility in their relationship. Whereas from 1955, which was the year Bulganin and Khrushchev came to India, you've actually had a very, very steady, even after the breakup of the Soviet Union, actually, after there was a bit of a gap there, but very quickly the relationship came back to where it was. So I do think that, yes, you will see a change in Russia's posture and priorities, but I think for India, this is also in many ways an opportunity to grow its relationship, because our relationship with Russia has been very, the bandwidth is very narrow. It has been mainly defense, nuclear and space. The trade relationship with Russia historically has been not historically, at least in the last 2-3 decades, has been very, very narrow. And you can see that grow.
So, but when now, particularly when European countries say that, before the start of the war, Russia was supplying India less than 1% of your oil requirements, suddenly Russia is your top oil supplier, what do you say to that?
I'd say the market is the market. Right? We all believe in markets, right?
Of course. So let's talk a little bit about domestic politics as well, because as you said some time back, there's a lot of interest outside about domestic politics, and of course in India also there's a lot of interest about what's happening around the world. Your parliamentary colleague, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the Congress party, he made some comments while he was abroad. There was a backlash to those comments. Your party basically wanted him to apologize, and then subsequently now there's a court conviction and he's been disqualified. I want to know your...
Sorry, the two are not related.
The two are not related. Fair enough. I'm just
so that we are clear.
Chronological order of what's happened with Mr. Gandhi over the last couple of weeks. I want, first of all, your reaction to the disqualification and what the opposition is saying, that look, this sort of proves what we've been saying all along. The Modi government is illiberal. It's an electoral autocracy. Opposition's not being allowed to talk. How would you respond to them?
So let's assume I have a counterpart or a colleague, or I go abroad and somebody asks me what you're asking. How would I put it? I mean, that's essentially what you're asking me. I guess I would say that 4 years ago, Rahul Gandhi was disparaging of a community in a public meeting. This is not me saying it, it's on record. A member of that community took offense and began legal proceedings. Rahul Gandhi had an opportunity of rectifying the situation, of expressing regret. He chose not to do so. The legal proceedings then produced an outcome. The outcome triggered a law which I would remind you Rahul Gandhi himself had in a way supported some years ago. A law that has been applied, I think, to about 10, 12 other elected representatives, including of the ruling party. So my answer to somebody who asked me this would be the law is the law. Unless somebody thinks the law is not the law for them. I mean, that's...
Okay. Has anybody asked you this? Have any foreign diplomats or governments asked you this? But if they do, this would be your answer.
I'm practicing it on you, and if there is a...
Nice to know that you've equated me to a foreign diplomat. But let's, because the reason I ask you this is because there are ramifications of what he's saying and the narrative that the opposition wants to build. You have been vehemently opposing that narrative that's been constructed, some of which has been fed into by some sections of the Western press, that, since 2014, India has become an illiberal country, an electoral autocracy. You don't fear that this actions of the last 10 days or so feed into that narrative?
Look, my sense is those who are feeding that narrative, are people with an agenda. They're not stupid people, okay? So they will misrepresent facts, or they would, twist things, because it's part of developing a narrative. I'll give you some examples. If you look at some of these think tanks and reports which would come out, many of them would suggest to you as though there's a whole problem around Assam, which started with Narendra Modi as Prime Minister. Okay, you and I know it goes back to Indira Gandhi's time. But that's not the way the narrative is now, the sleight of hand which happens. They would say, that a former Chief Justice now entering Parliament is somehow not well reflective of the judiciary. They won't tell you it's happened before, and not, So, the beauty of these narratives is, what you shade, what you suppress, what you sharpen, then you stitch it around. Now, yes, for people who do all of this, they would certainly use it. But to which I would turn around and ask them, saying, so tell me, does that mean this law, after being applied to 10 or 12 other people, should not apply in this case? And in this particular case, this law and this application has a certain past. you know. So I think we need to recognize today that a lot of what passes off as debate, what is often suggested as an analysis of the state of the Indian polity, is actually politics.